Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the interview we had prepared for you. And
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Mino.
Indeed. And now we will continue with topic of disability and accessibility, and especially digital accessibility. What's in front of us, Łukasz, now?
Well, now we want to talk about what it takes to build a truly inclusive and accessible workplace, not just on paper, but the kind that is, as I said, truly accessible. Here to talk to you about it, we have Konrad Rychlewski representing Google. Konrad is partner and experience specialist. Hello, Konrad. Hi.
Hello, Łukasz. A warm welcome to everyone watching live or on demand later on. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Łukasz.
It's absolutely great to have you. Konrad, last year we really enjoyed the conversation with Magda Kotlarczyk, country director at Google, and she did focus on your approach at Google to disability. It's a very important topic for your company. Now, what would you say are the biggest barriers in the context of persons with disabilities in companies in general, based on your observation?
Well, this heavily depends on who you ask. I personally know plenty of individuals with disabilities with great skills who have never been given a fair chance to really demonstrate those. At the same time, you might have heard of companies who might have tried to take on board or recruit talent from the community of people with disabilities and might have found that this is a bit of a difficult task.
So when can we Yeah, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
Whenever I talk to individuals with disabilities, especially those looking for a job, I always emphasize that a disability must never be an excuse for a low skill set. In fact, one could argue that those coming from a community who is underrepresented in the workplace benefit in particular when they are a very proficient candidate, because those candidates not only need to meet the hiring bar, but they also need to overcome something that's often a much bigger barrier, meaning prejudice or any stereotypes. So I believe both companies and candidates have a shared responsibility towards working to create a more inclusive, a more equal opportunity on the job market.
Earlier in the day, it's interesting what you said. Earlier in the day, I think it was Sunita who had this fighter pilot control background. And she said that because of this expectation that if you have women in the Air Force, it is actually expected that in terms of skill set, they need to contribute more than men in a specifically male-dominated environment. So I suppose it's super interesting what you've just said, Konrad, in this context. But when we say that the company is ready to be open to people with disabilities, what do we mean by that? Can we try and operationalize that a little? Because most people have this simplified, simplistic view of what it means to be disability-friendly at company level.
Or smart, as Monica said earlier.
Or smart.
Absolutely. So to me, it's not necessarily a stage in company development, but much more a sincere and lasting commitment towards creating equal opportunity, which is visible from the very first interaction between a candidate and the recruiter, all the way to perks, development opportunities, and career growth. And once you have this commitment, which I would also say is an openness towards working iteratively towards this goal of having a truly inclusive company, not an expectation to be perfectly right from the very beginning, but a readiness to embark on this journey and to work together with all parties who are involved, all stakeholders, including your current and future employees, to create a truly inclusive space.
Can we try and elaborate on the truly inclusive part? Because there are things that we see, there are things that are difficult to spot in a company setting because it's more about more sophisticated procedures in the company. So what do we mean by that? Because studies show that most disabilities cannot be seen, or people prefer not to disclose them, not to share them. So what does it mean in a daily practice of a company?
Yet, just to add to it,
Sure.
we've heard recent statistics from World Health Organization that about 15% of global society is living with a disability. So this is a very, very high number. Every fifth almost person that we're meeting on the street could be living in with disability.
Exactly, Konrad, because earlier in the day we had this conversation about mental health issues and the fact that, well, also mental health issues have the disability stigma attached to it. We know so many cases, even well-known actors and celebrities suddenly sort of, what happens with no one
Absolutely.
expecting that.
You're completely right. Because we know that over 70% of all disabilities are actually hidden, are actually invisible. It is of paramount importance to create a safe space, to provide your current and future employees the psychological safety to request accommodations, to make it a natural thing to request accommodations, just like it is natural for companies to provide their workers with the right tools, with the right equipment, with the right software to perform their job, actually to perform to the highest potential. Accommodations should become a natural thing, even during the actual hiring process. I'm sure nobody would want their candidate's performance to be overshadowed by a company not being able to provide the right accommodations. And it's even better if those accommodations are later carried on to the actual work environment once the candidate joins the company, so that the business, your company, can benefit the most from their talent, from their skills, from their dedication.
Let me ask you a somewhat provocative question, Konrad. Why are people with disabilities especially important from the business perspective? Because that is how sometimes it's looked at, even.
Sure, in today's labor market, how dare you to ignore hundreds of thousands of individuals who have the right skills to make your business flourish only because they happen to also have a disability or be neurodivergent? Having those employees in your workforce translates into making your services, your products, being able to better address the needs of a much wider range of customers. On top of that, having them in your workforce elevates the interpersonal skills of all the colleagues in your company to a whole new level. Think resilience, think problem solving, think dedication, think a positive attitude. And lastly, this sends a powerful message to your existing and future colleagues. If you happen to develop a disability in the future, we will support you. This company will make sure the right accommodations are put in place so you can continue contributing to the success of the company. So everybody wins. You, your business, and your customers.
Konrad, I really wish everyone was half as articulate around those issues as you are, really succinctly summarizing the key points of this discussion. Konrad, ERGs, we are talking about those quite a lot here. How could they be helpful in this conversation, in this context? Because intuitively we can understand that whatever is bottom up, so to say, should in an ideal world work better.
Just a while ago, I mentioned how important it is to listen to your candidates, to listen to your colleagues. We discussed this when we referred to 70% of disabilities not being visible. ERGs make sure that the company is true to its mission, is true and remains true to its commitment, that this dialogue is really happening. ERGs combine members of the community, their colleagues, friends, and allies. They consolidate the community's voice, they galvanize leadership support, and fuel changes for the better. They make sure community members feel welcome, understood, and appreciated. Very often, they act as trusted advisors to teams who are in charge of designing the work environment. They act as consultants to those who have joined the company very recently and are exploring the accommodations which can be put in place. And they also make sure we celebrate the success so that we know how far we've come and what are the milestones, what are the goals we should set ourselves in the near future.
Konrad, now that I think about what you're saying in response to our questions, I think about school curriculums really, because the word bias, whether it's unconscious bias or cognitive bias, has been reappearing again and again, and it's one of the key reasons why people make really serious structural mistakes when thinking and operating in the D&I field. So my last question for you really, what would you recommend to those who are only at the beginning of this journey, to those companies that are starting their path of in the area of disability? Because as I said, the reason I said school curriculum is I think that the bias dimension to it is so important that we should talk a lot more about it. Because the easy path for the employer is to, stay on course of the easiest shortcut you can get to a goal, to a purpose. So employers very often, for risk management reasons, follow the standard path, the most intuitive path. So what would be your advice to those people who maybe don't have any ill intentions, but simply don't know how to go about it?
Sure. First of all, let me emphasize one thing. Becoming a more inclusive company must never be one of passion project or fashion statement. Otherwise, it is destined to fail. The most important element is changing your mindset, is having the sincere and lasting commitment and realization that employees with disabilities can be at least as productive and at least as valuable as any other employees, as long as you put in place the right accommodations. Once you have this realization, and once you have it really internalized, the next step would be to put in the right infrastructure for your current employees to request accommodations. Because you might already be employing people with disabilities just even without knowing it. Once you have an idea about how this infrastructure should be working, once there is a process to request accommodations, you should go public with this process and announce it, for instance, next to your job offerings. For instance, in Google here, every single job offering we have links to a form where every candidate, regardless if they have any certification, any medical history, can request accommodations without explaining why they need it. So put this in place so that potential candidates can clearly see your commitment because you made it transparent and you made it visible that you can put in place those accommodations upon request. And the next step would be to carry on and to live up to your commitment. So put those accommodations in place, both in the hiring process and later when the successful candidate actually joins your company. And the last stage, I'm sure you will enjoy a lot. Celebrate your accomplishments. Acknowledge all those great contributions. Acknowledge all the challenges that you successfully overcome. and ideally also help other companies to get there as well.
Konrad, speaking of celebrating, I just want to thank you for giving so much attention to the precision with which you're sharing your opinions and insights and experience with us today. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for that. Konrad Rychlewski, Google Partner Experience Specialist. All the best.
Thank you, Konrad.
Thank you so much for having me.